Have you ever wondered about shooting guns with communists and police officers? Or about how to get arrested at a protest and go against the police in court? Or, even better, how Wisconsin could lose millions of dollars because of pro-genocidal politicians? Stay tuned and find out. Guys, gals, and in-between pals, welcome back to another episode of Resistance Radio. As always, my name is Dane Snudden, or the Super Communist, and I'm joined today by Emma Embers, the autistic gender bender and chaos queen.
The one and only.
And our AI program, James GPT.
I would just like to thank Badger State Resistance for making this guest possible today.
That wasn't prompted.
Yes, and we are joined by a very special guest, Ryan Clancy here, representing the
19th Assembly District.
19th Assembly District in the state of Wisconsin. And we have quite the show for you guys today.
We know because we're recording this after we already shot it.
We're definitely not doing that. We'll see it before.
So, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. This is worth the drive, I hope.
Yes. I think
we hope to.
No pressure.
We like to ask every guest, kind of why do you do what you do? What was your political upbringing? Just learn a little bit more about you.
Well, it started way before that, I think. So, when I was 3, my brother was brought home from the hospital, and I protested. Like, when he was brought home, I dropped trout, and I just peed all over the floor. And I suggested that my parents bring him back to the hospital. So that was I started protesting really early. I think my street cred is good there.
Did they meet your demands?
No, they didn't bring it back.
Damn it.
Assholes.
Did you at least pee on one of their legs so you could say you established dominance?
Right.
We asked the hard-hitting questions here.
Yes, yeah.
But, I mean, in high school, I put together an alternative newspaper, kind of brought people together from a bunch of different social cliques, and then we were threatened with expulsion by the school.
Wow.
So the ACLU stepped in
and
represented me for the first time. And it was great. And, I think I've been an organizer for a long time.
Wow.
I became a socialist, I think, in the Peace Corps in the Philippines.
Oh, wow.
Because I was living on a really remote island called Marinduque, and there were communist rebels living up in the mountains that were called the New People's Army. But the locals called them the nicest people around. So, you'd have the police that would, if the mayor did something wrong and he had state power, the police would do nothing, but the communists would come out of the hills and beat them up.
Right, yeah, right.
So, effective.
I'm not going to answer your question at all. I'm just going to go on and tell random stories.
Yeah.
And in the Philippines, you have, as your social circle, a drinking circle. So you'd sit down and you'd, pass a bottle of booze around. You'd eat, fully formed chicken embryos, duck embryos, which is called balut. And in my drinking circle, unbeknownst to me, I had a police officer. And I didn't realize that it was just, the people I hung out with.
Yeah.
Right.
So a couple months into it, he's like, "Hey, Ryan, we're going to go to the shooting range, the police shooting range, and shoot some guns at targets." And I'm like, no on a couple of counts. First, don't have a great relationship with police generally, not a huge fan. And also, I'm in the Peace Corps. It would be a really weird look.
Sure.
And he's like, "No, we're going to go do this." And I'm like, "I really can't." And he's like, I'm not really asking." And I'm like, "Great, I guess we'll go shoot guns." So there's a picture of me in a Peace Corps t-shirt. This is a really long answer to your very basic question. I'm shooting an M16 at a police training facility. And then a couple days later, another person at my drinking circle was like, "Ryan, I heard that you went and shot guns with the police." And I was like, I was kind of under duress. It wasn't really a thing.
It wasn't my choice.
Yeah, and he's like, "You know who NPA is?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, I'm NPA." And I'm like, "Does the cop know?" And he's like, "Oh, no, that would be really awkward." So he's like, "We're inviting you to shoot guns up in the mountains with us, the New People's Army." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I definitely can't do this. This is a terrible idea." And again, they weren't really asking. So I went with the communists and shotguns. And this, it was an AK-47, I think. Had a grenade launcher attachment on it.
Okay, yeah.
And
Gorilla's
jokingly, I was like, "Can I shoot a grenade?" And he's like, "No, of course not. That's ridiculous." It wasn't ridiculous because he didn't want some random 20-something-year-old to shoot a grenade that he had never really done that before. Yeah. It was that they were $2 each, and he wasn't going to shell that out. So it was,
it's fair enough.
Probably more nowadays.
But anyway, communists seemed way cooler than at least being a police officer. So that was my not so gentle introduction to communism and socialism and all that.
I mean, that's you saw the dichotomy right there.
Right. No, exactly. Right. No, and there were literally people starving to death on that island.
Right.
And the state did very little. And the NPA did mutual aid. They were keeping people alive. They were kind of doing the good work that others weren't. So. And I ran for office because I was a teacher and I had 44 students in my classroom at one point, and that seemed ridiculous. And I want more money for public schools and smaller class sizes and mountain communism.
You radical monster.
It's that trying to help people to socialist radical pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
So I do think it is interesting because I am, typically the most radical in quote person on the show.
Not tonight.
You're right, yeah. But I guess, kind of that line, because a lot of people that are on the left that do consider themselves socialists, like, they would not want to run for office. So, like, what is that like for you, kind of balancing, like, the organizer, you got the hard left that were like, hell no, we're never supporting an elected official. What is that dynamic like?
No, and it's great, and, like, those people are my best friends, right? And there really is, and I hope there's always that tension, right? Mm-hmm. If you had told me 15 years ago that I'd be even running for public office, I'd say that's ridiculous. Like, that's not a way to anything that I want to see happen.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't really seen anybody who was doing that. And then I started getting the vague inkling that we could build power by being in office as leftists and socialists.
Yeah.
The NPA, I suppose. I'm a sleeper cell.
Very inconspicuous.
We're going to cut all of this out, right? This is but no, it's, I mean, it's kind of a yes and philosophy, right? I mean, we're not going to vote our way to socialism in most respects.
Yeah.
But the work that we can do in office brings other people into socialism. Like when I first ran for office in 2019, and I became the first socialist elected in my area since 1956, it was much more difficult on doors. When people were like, "You're a socialist? Like that's a bad word. What are you doing?" And I would explain, what that meant to me. I didn't tell the story about the communist.
Probably a good idea.
But I talked about meeting people's basic needs and all that. But now it's much, much easier. People are like, I mean, both because we have folks like Zoran and AOC and Bernie and all that, and it's much more palatable. But I can point to my own policy and say, in Milwaukee, you don't have to like socialism, but do you like the right to counsel, which provides attorneys for folks who are facing eviction? Do you like paid family leave? Right? All these things. And they're like, well, those are all great. And I'm like, well, those are all socialist policies. Kind of a socialist, but call them what you want. Like, I just, can you support these things, regardless of the name?
Yeah, that's
huge.
Yeah, that's a great strategy, and I mean it's we've had a couple, like we had Francesca on, and then also Juliana Bennett recently, who's running, and so it is interesting. It's something we've talked about is we're kind of seeing this like resurgence of sewer socialism in a way, and so that's. We were all hyped with Zoran, but then getting to talk to people like you, and then the other people I just named is like. It's pretty cool to see that happening, and
it is. I mean, we're building momentum. I mean, it's and it's growing exponentially. Like just a few years ago, Darren Madison and I were the first socialists at the state for 86 years, and we doubled the size of the caucus. We have Fran Hong, we have Kristen Phelps. I am certain that next year in the legislature we'll have even more than 4, and that's a great.
I sure hope so.
Way to go. Yeah.
So on this podcast, we attract a huge number of conservative hate watchers. Thank you for feeding our engagement, if you're out there. I love reading your comments. But for them, these are the kind of conservative hate watchers that think Joe Biden was a radical leftist.
Yeah.
So, would you mind explaining what the difference is between socialism and your mainstream Dem position, and maybe even socialism and communism while you're at it? Because a lot of them seem to think Biden was a communist.
It is wild to see the term socialism or communism or whatever else both used interchangeably and applied to like anybody left of Reagan. It is totally bizarre.
By the way, fuck Ronald Reagan.
I didn't greet you that way. I know that's part of your culture here, and I'm so sorry if you're offended. But absolutely fuck Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
I say this, fuck Ronald Reagan.
This is actually the first time I've gotten a guest to also say fuck Ronald Reagan.
Oh, that's right. No, I meant to greet you that way. And I'm really sorry.
we had Charles said fuck Ronald Reagan, but
that's right. But we didn't get to use it.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I don't get hung up on kind of the caucuses or the specific definition of academic socialism. Mm-hmm. I think socialism is meeting people's basic needs, and then using state power to do that when we can.
Yeah.
when it's applied to folks who are moderate and feckless, it pisses me off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, Biden is not a socialist. Get that word out of your mouth, right?
And that reminded, yesterday I was live on Twitch, which, if you guys are watching, subscribe to our Twitch. And I was reading Trump's statement where he called Chuck Schumer Palestinian. And I was like...
These are not insults!
And Emma was in the chat, and Emma was like, they always make him sound cooler. And I was like...
I wish they were that cool. I wish Chuck Schumer was a Palestinian.
Right.
Or even just supportive of Palestine.
I'm kind of curious as to, what... Maybe not just you, but, the Socialist Caucus in general. What is kind of the treatment / reaction you guys get from other people that are, the liberals and...
Yeah, so Rep. Madison and I kind of came out swinging almost 4 years ago now, and we kind of quickly became kind of the moral and ethical center of that larger Democratic caucus.
Okay. Right.
And people started coming to us, even after a few months, being like, hey, what's your take on this policy or this one or this one? And Fran Hong was right there with us, too, was not officially part of the caucus, but was part of the caucus.
Yeah.
Right.
And people come to us because we do our homework, and we're right.
Yeah.
And it's been really neat to have a bunch of, we call them social-ish Dems who are with us on all the votes, have not adopted that label yet. Angelina Cruz and Angelito and Tenorio, I'm looking at you. They are so good, and they essentially caucus with the Socialist Caucus.
Interesting.
Frequently, we kind of share notes on our breakdowns of policy. But more, moderates find us really annoying.
Okay,
and we are often the ones in there, kind of guiding the conversation. And it has changed the conversation in the larger Dem caucus to a great extent. When Darren and I first showed up, in the caucus we have a list of things called the non-controversial list. And on that list, almost every time that we met, were things that would lock up more people for more crimes for more years.
Yeah.
Which the data says is terrible, does not keep anybody safer, is incredibly expensive, is really damaging on communities. When you sever somebody from their community, it's bad, and it has no good effects. We brought those things off the non-controversial list over and over and over again, to the point where now when those come up, and they come up less frequently in caucus, people look to us, or sometimes other people, to make the argument about why we should vote no on those. And increasingly, we're getting a critical mass of folks who oppose bullshit Republican legislation like that, which should be partisan, right? We should not have a single Dem voting for crap like that.
Right. Yeah.
So speaking of bullshit partisan legislation, how do you feel about the compromise Tony Evers reached with the Republicans to spend the state's surplus? I feel like you look at the projections, it's going to be $600 go to a married couple on their tax returns. First of all, I'm not even going to get that, because a debt collector is going to get it way before it reaches my pocket. And second, that is going to clear one small thing that I'm behind on. Honestly, I feel like you should just use the whole thing to fund social services.
Yep, agreed.
So it's bad, and the more you look at it, kind of the worse it gets. On the face of it, and it's frustrating, and I think the Republicans and Tony, all of whom are on their way out, and I think it's really irresponsible to have three dudes who have very little stake in the next legislative session.
Yeah.
Basically shit on the floor of the apartment they're moving out of, and bash in all the doors and rip out the copper cables.
Yeah.
Scott Walker did it best.
That's true. That's
Oh
right.
my God.
Pour some out for Scott Walker.
Well, and the Democrats have got this long tradition of trying to be more like the Republicans, so...
It is frustrating sometimes. But the more you look at it, the absolute worst it gets. I mean, even on the face of it, giving, $300 and $600 to folks, not great. It would be better if it was like a stimulus check, where basically every person, other than undocumented folks who should get it and didn't, would get a check in the mail. That would at least be somewhat progressive. It would be not a great use of the surplus, because we're in a structural deficit and things are going to be really bad next session.
Yeah.
But it's taking that on its face. If that was what it looked like, it would be okay, and it would be much better than what it is. What it actually is a non-refundable tax credit, and that's really bad for poor people, and that's great for the very rich. So when they say it's going to be $300 for a single person, $600 for a couple filing jointly, you're only getting that $300 or $600 if you're making probably over $100,000 a year. So half of the dollars are going to people making six figures or far, far more. The other half is going to everybody else. That's a much larger group of people
Yeah.
We plotted it out, and I can provide you the graph if you want to put it up as a graphic.
That would be
like
amazing.
now,
Yeah.
people can stop staring at me. And what it looks like is that, so if you're extremely wealthy, right, if you're making $100,000 or more, you're going to get probably close to that full $600 as a couple, $300 as an individual. If you're making less than $30,000 a year, you're going to get an average of $45 in that check. If you're making less than 15, your average check is going to be 74 cents.
Oh.
So no, like, it's really bad. And then we talk about the really non-sustainable funding for schools, the idea that it's funding that's called some certain rather than some sufficient. So they talk about giving increases to special ed funding, but it's not going to be what they say it's going to be. It's a scam. We shouldn't fall for it. The much better option here is something called AB 1176. It was authored primarily by Representative Phelps and Representative Cruz. That would do twice as much for public schools, and only public schools, and then cost half as much. So we'd still have enough of a surplus to avoid the terrible hole that we're going to dig ourselves into this next session.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, is there really no other way to get them back in session for, like, the rest? Because, like, the
Right.
fact that, reminder for anybody that wasn't keeping up, the Republicans decided that the Assembly was going to stop doing business in February and not do business again until January of 2027 when they have a new governor. In theory for them, Tom Tiffany, dear Christ, I hope not. But I have been, like, desperately asking everybody that I know that's, like, connected to the legislature in any way of, like, is there any possible way to get those assholes back to work?
So today we showed up and we sat around because if we weren't in session today and then tomorrow, Republicans could come in and they could overturn all the vetoes they want to, because they write their own rules.
Wow.
But we can't bring up new business. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, we will be having a session, but just very narrowly on this ridiculous plan that I am hopeful will die in the Senate. I'm not sure that it will die in the Assembly. I think we have enough Democrats that will cross over and collaborate with Republicans on it.
It's just crazy to me that they can just stop working.
Yep.
Like,
And still
I can't do that. Like,
I want to be working. Like,
Yeah.
I was on, I think, 400 or almost 400 bills
wow.
this last session. And we are putting in the work because we know they're not generally going to get hearings. I think
Right.
19 Democratic bills got hearings. Most of them didn't even come up for a vote. Only 2 that were in our packages did. But the reason that we're putting in that work is that we want a blueprint for next session when we will have a Democratic trifecta. Right? Trump
Yes.
has
Yeah, I
fucked
believe
things up so badly, and the Republicans at the state have tied themselves to him. We're going to have a clean sweep, including the Assembly, unless the moderates really, really make a mess out of this. So we're trying our best here to keep them from doing that.
Never underestimate Democrats' ability to...
No.
I consistently find myself wishing, as a reluctant Democrat, that Democrats were better, because far too often they seem to snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory. But on the other hand, I also appreciate Tony Evers for being, like, the only thing that's stopping us from being, like, Texas or Florida in terms of trans rights. But at the same time, him fighting on that stuff is great and wonderful. But at the same time, him, like, just completely giving away the bag on this is frustrating.
If he didn't do this, my opinion would have been, like, he did what he could with what he had, but you're really going to try and close out your fucking career with this.
Well, that and then also Ira, too.
Alright,
He did end up signing
And
that.
the absolutely god-awful budget.
Yeah.
Like, which a good friend of mine, Heather in Madison, from the Wisconsin Public Education Network, described him doing a victory lap around a dumpster after it was
A
signed.
flaming dumpster.
Right. And they're like, what pisses me off is that a lot of these folks are not saying this is the best we could get. We were kind of over a barrel on this one. They're cheerleaders for it.
Yep.
And we have to be thinking bigger. Like, we can do so much better than this. And that's why we're putting out all this legislation, knowing that it's not going to get a hearing. But, stockpiling up and having this ready to go on day one when we start next session.
So we've talked a little bit already about kind of public schools and how important that is to have funding. And I went to, if not then one of the most underfunded schools in the Green Bay School District. And so I absolutely love my time there. I learned a lot of really great life lessons. The education itself from the teachers wasn't great, but learned a lot. I stumbled across, actually, right before the show, that it is National Charter Schools Week, and the White House posted a picture about that. That was AI generated, believe it or not.
Of course it
And
was.
so I guess just to our viewers, why is having a robust public education system so important, especially for Wisconsin?
It should be the way up for a lot of folks, and it's not. And my experience as a public school teacher was heartbreaking. I was at for the first couple of years of my teaching career after I was a substitute. I was in this awesome teacher-led, project-based school, and it was really, really good, and it met the needs of the students incredibly well. And we outperformed all the private and charter schools and all that. But we lost more than a handful of students every single year, and eventually we were kind of unenrolled by the charter schools. So we lost teacher after teacher after teacher, and then we turned it in. I then transferred to a much bigger school, and I went from an experience of having 20 or 25 students and following them through all 4 years, and making these really close bonds. Yeah, to having 44 students in one of my classrooms my last year of teaching. And it was heartbreaking because I think I was a pretty good teacher to 20 or 25 kids. Yeah. I was not effective to 44, and that was...
that's hard. That's I was in some college classes that didn't have that many people in it.
Right. And especially, in high school, you need to make those connections with students. You need to understand their needs in order to meet them. And, having hundreds and hundreds of students on your rolls was just... it wasn't sustainable.
School funding is usually based around the property tax of the surrounding area. What are some ways that we can fix that? And I know that we live under a regime that is devaluing education, so it's hard. But
well, thanks for asking. So we have a bill, me and Fran and the rest of the Socialist Caucus, that would stop paying for education with property taxes entirely.
Oh my god!
It would make us the first state that does that, because you're right?
Teed that one up great on accident.
And then doing that, it is just inherently inequitable to have rich schools in rich neighborhoods and poor schools in poor neighborhoods. Yeah. The whole idea of public education is they can lift everybody up.
Yes.
And we failed in that. And literally, every state does that. We would be the first state to do that entirely.
Oh
so we'd really be leading on something in Wisconsin. And here's the best part, for some people who don't care about public schools, is that it would lower everybody's taxes by 44%. Because all we do is tax the extremely wealthy, right? Yeah. So we had 1% to the highest tax bracket. Right. So the highest tax bracket right now starts at roughly $500,000. Mm-hmm. So you take dollars, $5 million one, $5 million two, and you just pay another 1% on those. Then you make a new tax bracket starting at $1 million. So dollars 1 million and one, 1 million and two. We tax those at a much higher rate. All we have to do is tax the rich. It drops property taxes and therefore, rent on everybody all across the state.
And they're still rich.
And they're still rich. If you're making more than $1 million a year, good job. You've won a capitalism. We're going to take some of that. Because you didn't get rich by yourself. You got rich because you had an educated workforce, because you were able to exploit other people, maybe with their consent, maybe not. But that's it. And as it turns out, that is not a socialist policy that everybody hates. In fact, even conservatives when I'm outdoors. If I'm not connecting with somebody, I'll be like, do you own here? Do you rent? And we'll start talking about that. And he's like, well, I don't like you or socialism, but actually that sounds great. I'd love my property taxes to go down 44%. And then we talk about how we do that, and it's really popular, and it's long overdue.
I would agree, because, that was a big thing. So I went to East Green Bay High School, which is, one of the oldest high schools in the state. Curly Lambeau went there. And so that was kind of the thing, is that, the neighborhood around East was super vibrant 50, 60 years ago, but now it's not. And because we have urban sprawl, the schools that are way out of nowhere are the ones that are getting all the money. And so that's awesome to hear that is being passed. That would be amazing.
And we have to think bigger, right? We have to do things like that. Yes. It can't just be like with this compromise plan, the idea is to move a tiny amount of, basically temporary funding in there, and it's just taking it from one bucket and putting it in another. That's dumb. Let's not do that. Let's do big sustainable swings and finally tax the rich. Right.
And I'm such a big fan of left politicians. Use or on everybody. It pisses me off to no end when I hear a politician running and their only rhetoric is about the middle class.
Mhm.
Because I'm like, everybody thinks they're middle class, and that's the
Right,
point
no,
of
right.
having
But
it.
there is no middle class
right.
anymore. There's the extremely rich, and then there's everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Or as Bernie always says, the 98% versus the
Right,
1%, or the
right.
99% versus the 1%.